Welcome to the Reaching In podcast. I'm your host, Pastor David. The Reaching In podcast is a ministry of Calvary Chapel, Newport News, which focuses on your spiritual growth with an emphasis on sincere devotion, lifelong discipleship, and authentic discussion.
Hey, this is Pastor Michael, your Reaching Up pastor, and you're listening to the Reaching In podcast.
Welcome to the Reaching In podcast. I'm your co-host, Anita Bowman, and I have with me today our host,
Pastor David.
and also today a very special guest and dear friend of ours, Pastor Michael Banks.
Hello, everyone. I am a big fan of the podcast. If you've noticed on the Calvary Couch or other places, I've been pushing this podcast hard because I love what Pastor David and Miss Anita have been bringing. So thank you guys for what you do and for allowing me to join you today.
You are welcome. We thought it was only appropriate, only fitting that since you were our first guest in our actual home, our new home, that you would be our first guest on our podcast. So
Nice. Apropos.
welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, before we get to know Pastor Michael, or you get to know Pastor Michael a little bit more in depth, we're going to have a little icebreaker. So Anita, take it away.
Yes, this one is called Break the Bowman Tie. So there are things that David and I have discussions about. He feels passionately about it in one way. I feel passionately about it in another way. So we are looking for you to break the tie.
Or basically settle your arguments. Is that how
Yes,
this
You could
works
say
out?
it like that.
Yeah, sure. Please choose wisely, my friend.
Oh,
Number
dangerous ground here.
number one, should you put ketchup on a hot dog?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, let me rephrase to help you. Should a person over the age of 5 put ketchup on a hot dog?
Why would there be an age limit to ketchup? There's always purpose for ketchup.
I think
No,
the tie is broken.
hot dogs are mustard and onions. You
No.
can put relish, but you do not put ketchup on it unless you're chopping it up into little bits so it doesn't get choked in your itty bitty throat.
No, ketchup is where you start. Ketchup is where you start, and all these other things
No, you
develop
can
around
saute
it.
your onions. You can eat them raw. You can use mustard.
Oh, you're so sophisticated here, Mrs. Bowman.
We call that sedity.
You forget where I'm from.
Okay,
I guess we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. We will. Ketchup for the win.
Moving on. Here's the next one. How do you feel about Velcro shoes for a man in his late 30s?
Velcro shoes for men at any age is probably not a great idea.
Oh.
Not a fan.
Oh.
We call them mall walkers, and lest we frequent the mall for the sole purpose of tracking it over and over again, I think we want to avoid.
Can I not have Velcro shoes of the gospel of peace?
Yeah, no.
No, because you're still at an age where you can actually bend over and tie. So I think
But
you need to
what
have
if
laces on the shoes for the gospel of peace.
But how quickly I can get into the mission field if I don't have to tie anything?
This is
Yes.
lazy. You might as well have flip-flops then, if that's your attitude.
Okay, we apologize to every college student.
Well, the Jesus sandals. I mean, you can't go wrong with the
You're talking
Jesus
Birkenstocks
sandals.
here?
The Birks. The Birks work.
All right.
Birks work. You don't want to go into the mission field, and the first thing that a potential proselyte would say is, "What are those?" Like, that's not.
It's a hindrance to
That's
the
not
gospel.
how you break that's not how you break the ice for evangelism.
Perhaps that would hinder the work of God, and I should probably get something with laces. I will concede 1 and 1.
1 and 1. So
One
we
and
have
one.
one more to,
Breaking
Break-
the tie.
break
Oh,
the tie.
Breaking the tie.
Okay. Electronica or ska?
Ooh. Wow. That's a tough one. I think I'm gonna go with ska. I think ska.
Wow. Well. Okay, Anita, you win. Our guest has broken the tie twice in your favor, so you have won this one.
Yes.
But wait
what
for
else
our
is
next
new for
Hey.
for our wives?
That's right. Wives always win. Wives always win. And Pastor Michael is married to a lovely
Very
Samoan
beautiful
woman named Mata.
Absolutely,
But-
Malo, my dear.
That's right. So we want to hear some more about Pastor Michael so that you can get to know him. We love him, but let him speak for himself. Pastor Michael, let's share a little bit about yourself so the audience can get to know you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was actually born and raised here in Newport News, Virginia, and it's been just a great, interesting, actually, 10 years, just experiencing ministry life, because I did not intend to be in it. I actually didn't intend to be here in Newport News, Virginia, beyond college. The intent was to escape the state and head south to Georgia and Atlanta, and experience that whole thing. But God kept me here, and I'm glad He did. Literally, when I was set to enter graduate school back in 2006, had everything worked out. I was going to go down to Emory University for my divinity degree there, and God just told me, no, don't go. I had no other purposes or reasons to not go, except that God said no. And so I didn't. And recently thereafter, I came to Calvary Chapel for the first time. And the rest, as you say, is history. Found my wife here and got my calling. And now I've been employed with ministry as vocation for coming up on 10 years. So it's pretty crazy.
10 years.
But grateful.
Wow. Well, we are glad to have Pastor Michael as our worship pastor. You can check him out every Monday with the Music Monday selection on our YouTube channel and at Calvary Chapel Newport News website. You can also check it there at CCNN TV. But we're going to hear some more about Pastor Michael and his views on worship in the next segment. You don't want to miss it.
We are back with our Reaching Up Pastor Michael Banks.
Yes, made it through segment 1 without being fired. It's amazing.
Yes. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about worship music and Christian music and the state of Christian music today and what are the trends and all of that. So let's get into it. Pastor Michael, how would you describe the current state of Christian worship music? Take us through the evolution of it and just what are you noticing with it today as it stands?
So it's interesting. There's a theologian named Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and in one of his books, he talks about how he hated harmonic music in worship. He thought that everyone should just sing in unison.
Wow. Because
anything beyond that is bringing glory to oneself and not to God. And when I read that for the first time, in part, I felt convicted because I'm like, that's all I care about. It's like a lot of harmonies, that sort of thing. That's kind of what I do. I put it together, that sort of thing. But I could get where he was getting at. I think traditionally, especially early on, his era was around the World War II era, of course. But even prior to that, with the Puritans, and you look through the hymnal, and what was foundational for those early hymn writers and those, even in the Psalms, the glory of God, of course, has to be central, sure. But in the midst of the writing outside of the Bible, the hymn books and everything, it was describing the stories of the Bible and making sure that nothing else infringed on that, right?
Right. So,
and for Dietrich Bonhoeffer, it was don't sing harmonies. So none of that infringes on that. And today, I grew up Pentecostal, so it was choir music and, all this sort of Kirk Franklin and Mississippi Mass Choir and that sort of thing. So harmony was everything and through the 80s and the 90s. And then today we've kind of moved away from choir music, but the emphasis of harmony, the way it's used now, is quite different. And I think it would really complement a lot of the things that maybe Dietrich Bonhoeffer was concerned about. I think that the state of worship music today is healthier than it has been, though, in recent past. I know, again, like I said, I'm a Pentecostal kid by birth, and sometimes a lot of the music could come off a little empty,
Okay.
right? But a lot of the music from different genres, from CCM, contemporary Christian music, for those who don't know that acronym, contemporary Christian music, to gospel music, they have quite a bit more depth, in my opinion, across the board. There's some that are a little bit more shallow, and others that are like so deep, if you go in those waters, don't expect to come back. But across the board, in general, I think we found a good place across Christian music where there's good depth and good honing into the foundations. And that makes me feel really good, because at the end of it all, if it's not pointing to Christ and it's not pointing to biblical principles, there's really no point to it.
Absolutely. So overall, you say that the health is good. We're better than we were before. You've seen a more of a depth to the lyrics themselves.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's a depth to the and I'm thinking particularly with like gospel music, and I understand where it came from. A lot of our listeners may understand where that came from, because gospel music is derived a lot out of the Black experience, right?
Right.
And the Black experience was about being able to overcome insurmountable odds, right? From whether it be slavery or Jim Crow laws,
Absolutely.
Civil rights movement, that whole thing. So there's great value in those songs, and I find great value in those songs. It's not that they should be thrown away, but to emphasize those themes over and against what I would deem more central themes, which is freedom in Christ,
Right.
spiritual freedoms, and that sort of more global and grandiose ideas, is what's important. And that comes through in the lyrics more than anything.
So lyrics have gotten more depth, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that gospel music does have a certain flavor. And if all you do is listen to, you mentioned Christian contemporary music, would you say that if you take Christian music as a whole, not just one compartment, one genre, we're able to see more of the depth of the different styles and the different, not just styles, but different elements in music to encourage you, music to instruct you, things of that nature?
Yeah, I think music has a way of tapping into emotion in different aspects of who we are, in a way that other things can't. Right? I remember you guys talking about last week, talking about how to memorize scripture, right? And I think it was you, Anita, talking about using music to do so. Like, music is a powerful tool. Listen, a speech rarely gets stuck in your head, but a song always gets stuck in your head, right? Like, in the stupidest songs, like Baby Shark has been in my head for about 3 years, right? And I can't get it out. And that song has no eternal value for my life. If I get up to the pearly gates and St. Peter welcomes me with Baby Shark, like I'm going to cry. One, because the pearly gates will be so beautiful and I'm glad to make it to heaven, but also, really, Peter? Like, we're going to sing that's my welcome song, Baby Shark.
Wow.
So music just does. It has a way of like tapping into the mind and the heart, right? And so for me, as a musician, as a guy who's been around and played music pretty much my whole life, and that's like my vocation, the more types of music that I can get into me, and I mean that just on a flat level, not like, because we can talk about lyrics on another frame, but just to what you said, Pastor David, different genres in the Christian realm can help you get kind of a nice holistic view of who God is and how God works. The Bible talks about the fact that it's a Greek phrase, panta te ethne, all of the nations will worship, every tribe, every tongue, every people, right? And so if that's the case, right, God doesn't homogenize his worship. He actually makes it more variegated. The more different forms of worship there are, the more God is exalted. And I think that's the way we should approach worship music, right? Gospel, contemporary Christian, choir music, encouraging music, some music doesn't. Amazing Grace. I love to bring this up. Amazing Grace. If you sing the song in your head right now, and you'll notice it doesn't say God, it doesn't say Jesus, it doesn't say cross, it doesn't say any of those things. The most theological word is grace. And you have to kind of infer that it's talking about grace that comes from Jesus. Yeah, yet right. It is the most recognizable Christian song there is, right?
It is.
So if you take a song like that, if you wrap it around with other things and other ideas, then it has so much more value to it. And that's the way we should approach worship and worship music, in my opinion.
That's some great insight there on the genres of music. And it just so happens that you serve at a church with a diversity of cultures. And so that it lends itself to different styles of music, as Pastor Banks was describing. Nita?
And then also segues into the next segment, talking about trends, the trends that we see in worship music.
We are back with our special guest, Pastor Michael Banks, our worship pastor. We wanted to get into the trends that we've seen in worship music. And while I'm not a musician or anything, I appreciate music and I love it. One of the things that I'm grateful for is that in worship music and Christian music overall, there's been a great increase in the quality of the music and the reach of the music. You have constantly people doing covers of popular Christian worship songs from Hillsong and Lauren Daigle, and they're crossing over into the mainstream. There are people who don't even know about Jesus Christ and are not Christians that are listening to this music. And I believe that it's a positive trend that we're seeing the production value go up and the reach increase. Anita, what have you seen trend-wise in Christian worship music?
Well, I've noticed that as well, as far as more positive trends. But in researching for this episode, I was looking at both positive and negative trends of worship music and Christian music today. And just people putting on the internet about worship music or Christian music having a worldly sound because of the instrumentation that it uses. Another concern is that it focuses on self, or it focuses on the world rather than God. And I think that one was more of, that people's belief that all music should be directed to God in worship and not necessarily always valuing discipleship or encouragement that can happen through music. And then a third thing that I found was just bad theology. People making claims that songs have some pretty messed up views on God in them. So what would you say, Pastor Michael, to both the positive and what would be a negative trend in worship music and Christian music today?
Yeah, I want to actually pick up on the last thing that you said, Anita, about the bad theology. I think one of the most important things that a worship leader at any church, or whoever's in charge of choosing the songs at any church, his responsibility or her responsibility is to make sure that the songs that are presented at your church have proper theology. That is one of the things that I labor over week after week, especially when we get new songs in. I remember one time we were thinking about introducing a new song, and I'll say the name of the song. It was Hillsong's "What a Beautiful Name." And I'm trying to remember the line. Oh, yeah. It was the second verse says, you wouldn't want heaven without us. So Jesus, you brought heaven down. And a lot of people at that time, the song was relatively new. Everybody was like, yes, this is a great song. And I enjoyed the song, but I had reservations about introducing the song to our congregation because of that one line. Yeah. And me and one of our other worship leaders, Alicia Allister, many of you guys know who she is. And we have a regular, at least 1 to 2 times a week, we talk about worship music and talk about the ministry. And so I remember us talking about that song for about 30 minutes, talking about that one line, breaking down the theology so that we could be comfortable enough to be okay presenting the song to our worship team. And then, of course, to our church. Now, I belabor that point because that is a legitimate concern. I mean, the last thing you want is to be singing things that aren't true.
Right.
And even worse, singing things that aren't true about God.
Oh, absolutely not.
Slippery slope there, my friend. Slippery slope.
Awfully dangerous, you know? It's like stealing. You're like, if you're going to steal, like, don't steal at all, but like, don't steal from God. Like, that's just, it's not smart, you know? But I agree that can be, I don't know if I'd call it a trend that's happening right now. I don't know if I go that far, but I would say it's something to be aware of. Both those like myself who get to, you know, wear the worship leader hat, but for anybody, you know, understand, I've heard Pastor David say it, understand your theology first. Be so grounded in the biblical foundations of your faith that when you hear a song and you hear something that may be askew, you can wrestle with it appropriately, wrestle with it and reconcile it if it needs to be reconciled, or get rid of it out of your playlist if it needs to be gotten rid of. That's a really important piece of just being a Christian and listening to music. But I think one of the really positive trends that I've seen, and again, this is a little bit of my Pentecostal background coming out, but this kind of renewed interest in what's being termed prophetic worship. And prophetic worship, really, all it comes down to is being sensitive to the Spirit in the worship moment, right? So you have the written down, like established, this is the song that we wrote or whatever. And then there's the prophetic moment where, you know, God may be leading the worship moment in a certain way. And what I appreciate about it is that a lot of artists these days, if they're worship artists, they're, you know, leaving the recording track on. So like if you listen, Hillsong has always been like good at that. You know, you get a Hillsong album from like 2000, 2002, and their songs are like 9 minutes long, like 9-10 minutes long, you know, Fire Fall Down for like 15 minutes.
Wow. But actually more gospel centric, because think back in the day when you got a Hezekiah Walker album or a Kirk Franklin album, those tracks exactly 9 minutes.
Like you ain't made it by 15 minutes in, like you ain't gonna make it, bro.
No 3-minute songs here.
No. But you're seeing that pop up a little bit more often in certain genres of worship music, which I appreciate, and especially with today's YouTube era, and you can watch the videos and you can see those worship moments happen and being sensitive to the Spirit and not just boxed in. That's something I kind of preach to our team a lot. What's the Spirit saying, and how can we literally speak to that moment and use music to address those moments as well. So that's one positive thing that I definitely see.
Now, is there anything that if you had the throne for a day and you could decide the direction of Christian worship music, what would you like to see in the grand scheme of Christian worship music? What would you like to see more of?
That's a tough one. You know, one thing that I'm already seeing that I'm enjoying a lot, and you kind of mentioned it, Pastor David, was a lot of crossover type artists. And what I mean by crossover is, again, listening to gospel music growing up and everything, hearing gospel artists do contemporary Christian songs in their way. One of my favorite groups is Ashmont Hill. And Ashmont Hill, if you attend our church, you know that I love Ashmont Hill because we do a lot of their songs. And we do a lot of their songs because they have been so good at taking songs that are traditionally, you know, contemporary Christian and giving it a different kind of sound, but it's not all the way gospel type sound. It's just like a different feel to it. And I'm seeing a lot of that more and more. You see Tasha Cobbs doing songs with Matt Redman. You know, you see Jonathan McReynolds doing a song with what's your girl? Terry, I can't remember her name now. But your girl, who just did a gospel album last year with Kirk Franklin, but amazing singer.
Tori Kelly.
That's her name. Yeah, Tori Kelly and Jonathan McReynolds doing songs. Tori Kelly and Kirk Franklin doing an entire album together. Like, seeing those types of things is super encouraging.
It is.
Elevation worship with Tetrabit, that's amazing to me. I love seeing that because, again, the beauty of the body of Christ is that we're very different, but the same God. Differences of gifts, it says in the scriptures, but the same Lord, the same Spirit works in all. So I love seeing that. That's what I want to see more of, more things trending that way, so that Christ is exalted by our diversities.
I really enjoy that last point that you made, because it testifies to the unity of the body and the strength of the body. And when you have different genres, different artists, different races coming together, it speaks in a way where you don't have to be so deliberate about telling you that we're together, we serve the same Lord, and just having those different tones and those different types of voices, it speaks volumes. And so music has a great effect on us. We go to church every Sunday, we sing songs, we clap our hands, we lift our hands to the Lord. And so music plays a very important role in the life of us as believers individually, not just corporately and not just as a topic. And so we want to get into the personal aspects of worship music and how that affects us as Christians. Now, wait just one moment. You didn't think we were going to cram the whole interview with Pastor Michael Banks into one episode, did you? Of course not. This interview was chock full of good nuggets about worship music and how it affects us personally in our walks with Christ. He's also going to share later on about personal songs that helped him at different times in his life, and you don't want to miss those answers to those questions. So stay tuned for part 2 of this great interview next Tuesday. But remember to keep pressing on and keep reaching in. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you were engaged and encouraged. If you're hungry for more content, check out our ongoing Old and New Testament teachings available on our app or through our website, calvarynn.church, and follow us on social media. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the Reaching In podcast belong solely to those individuals themselves and do not necessarily reflect the views of Calvary Chapel, Newport News.